So I'll start that now and we'll get started.
And I'm doing my best to keep an eye on the Facebook pages too. So if it looks like I'm distracted, I'm just seeing if we get any extra questions in.
Yeah, that's perfect. All right, so again, I just want to take a minute to welcome you all to this lunch break question and answer session. We are with University of Maryland Extension. I'm in Garrett County and Sarah's in Allegheny. And this is our attempt to get more people participating with Extension question and answer clinics. We sometimes call those plant clinics. And this is just a reminder slide that University of Maryland Extension is part of the College of Agriculture and Natural Resources. And we do receive federal funding at the college level. So we want to be sure that all of our programming is equal and accessible to all. So with that, again, my name is Ashley, and I am joining you again from Garrett County. And Miss Sarah, I'll give you a second to introduce yourself.
All right, it's pretty much the same thing. I am Sarah. I'm from Allegheny County, located near Bedford Road, if you're Allegheny County person and wondering where we're at. And we both share the same role as a Master Gardener Coordinator. And part of that is answering a lot of questions. I think today I've already had 3 phone calls, Ashley. So it's getting to
Oh,
be that season here where people
that
are running
season,
across issues.
especially on Monday morning after they've been outside all weekend. So we love that season.
Yeah.
So we had a couple of submitted questions, and as soon as we go through these submitted questions, the plan is that if you have any questions you'd like us to answer live, you can type those in the chat box, either via Zoom if you're joining us in Zoom, or via Facebook through the live streaming feed. You can submit any questions that you may have. And then towards the end, we're going to talk a little bit about garden planning, a little bit about heirlooms. Sarah's going to share a little bit about her honeybee adventures.
Oh,
And
yeah. Good.
yeah, so lots of fun stuff planned for us.
All
So the
right.
first question we had was, how do I get rid of invasive bulbs?
Yeah. So the person that asked me this, they have an invasive plant. I can't remember it. It's Donna, so I'm sure she could tell us. But the problem with them were that there's a large quantity and they're located next to plants that she doesn't want to dig up, because obviously the first thing we would say is, mechanically removing them, digging down, getting them out of there is the number one way to get rid of them. And then she had a thought that, like, if you just continue to snip the top, don't allow the bulb to get food, eventually, it'll succumb and that'll be that, which is also a mechanical way of removing it. However, Ashley and I were discussing this because I was like, I don't know, like, would that work? And she's like, yeah, that would work over the course of many years. And I think with the
Ashley and I were
quantity, discussing this because I was like, I don't know, like, would that work? And she's like, yeah, that would work over the course. Okay, I was like, hold on, I can hear myself, and that's crazy. So we were talking about the ways that you could easily get rid of it, and unfortunately, being that they are planted near other plants that you don't want to disturb the root system, that's not going to be a super easy fix. And you know, it's not a answer that many people will love the answer to, but it is an answer that would eliminate them in a shorter period of time, and that's just using glyphosate on the, like, painting it onto the actual plant, onto the leaves. I've never done that before. Ashley, have you ever done that?
Yes, I have done that before. It's an easy way to use a little bit of product and make sure that it goes exactly where you want it to go. And one of the qualities about glyphosate is, as long as it's a 100% glyphosate product, not mixed with anything else, it is only active on green growing tissue. So therefore, as long as, even if you got it around the roots of like a tree, on the base of the plant or anything like that, it's not going to affect that plant necessarily. So it only affects it if it gets on the leaf tissue. So it's a good way that you can selectively use it to only control certain plants. And again, because of the bulb tendency, if it's a spring blooming bulb, those plants are going to be setting their sugars right after they flower. So that's usually the best time to control it with an herbicide, because that's when they're going to be taking and translocating all of those, the chemical, like the herbicide chemical, down into the roots, and you'll get a more complete kill that way.
And then we always have to finish with, but always read the instructions when applying any herbicides. Please take into mind they are still a chemical. If it says to wear gloves, wear gloves. If it says to wear long sleeves, wear long sleeves. If it has specific mixing directions, please follow that. And that's just common knowledge, but sometimes we all need to be reminded of even basic things like that.
Right. And it always gets to be complicated when we're talking about these invasive plants because unfortunately they're so aggressive and so good at growing that we aren't left with a lot of other options. So, all right. Next on our list, it's carpenter bees. This is another one that Sarah wanted to talk about. These are the big, beautiful, a lot of people think they're bumblebees.
Humbles, yeah.
They're great.
Yeah, so this was one that I've seen kind of written about more on Facebook and other social medias, and I just think it's a good opportunity. Like when I see 10 of my friends all talking about the same thing online, and I see that they're pulling information from sites that aren't really vested, which Ashley, you could probably give them the whole rundown because she just read an article about how to do a good search. Because you can always get answers that are just really out there because they might be a company that's selling you a product. It might be a person that they do this at their house, but there's no scientific reason behind it. So anytime I see like, I don't want to say misinformation, but just information that's not vested spread on any social media, I think it's a really good point to like talk about it a little bit. So carpenter bees look really similar to bumblebees. You'll notice like on decks, on houses that are wood siding, even on just like boards, like if you have a handle, you'll notice them on there. They do look very similar to a bumblebee, but they don't, bumblebees live in the ground, whereas these guys are just trying to, it's not really they're not eating your deck. They're drilling a hole in it. That's where they want to put their larvae in there. So they do resemble a bumblebee, but they are just looking for a place to have their young, which, but I mean, it's destructive. And a lot of people don't want holes in the side of their deck and railing. And it can even stain because when they come out, it does leave a stain. That doesn't look nice on a light colored house or board. So I kind of came up with two different things that it would be good for eliminating them. It says, and the recommendation on using the insecticidal dust, I think that was from Penn State University. And yep, very good. Thank you, Ashley. Because it's the good and the bad, because they are good pollinators, like we want to keep in mind. But I can also see I don't want holes all through my house. So, you got to balance it. They use part of my deck. I know where they put the holes in it at. It does not bother me. It's not causing a structural issue. So I let them do their thing. Because part of my deck has like the Trex boards that are made out of the plastic. They don't touch those. And then the railing has the wood, and that is what they like to go after. So if I didn't like them or if they were causing a structural issue or, whatever's happening, you can use an insecticidal dust. The only thing with that, you need to be very careful because it is a dust that's easy to get into your lungs. So, you'd want to wear like some sort of mask, definitely put gloves and whatnot on, make sure you're washing it, following the directions on the container. And then I thought it was also interesting because bees are dormant at night. They're not completely harmless, but they're less aggressive at night. So it recommended to do that at night where you're spraying, you're like puffing the insecticidal dust up in there. I also saw, I think it was on what Ashley posted about where they like to where they like to drill their holes into. Painted surfaces are unattractive to them. They don't like them as much. So you can always try painting it. Nail holes and cracks should be filled with caulk or putty before painting. And that's just, I mean, if you paint it and it still has a hole in it, it's still attractive to the bee. So if you're filling that hole and then painting it, it's making it less attractive to a bee. So just food for thought. If you're seeing these, this is why you're seeing them. It is their season of laying eggs, and that's what they're attempting to do. They're not eating your deck. They're not like a termite. They're just looking for a place to lay their eggs and for their young.
Yeah, and it's interesting because they often return to the same place each season. So if you had them last year, for whatever reason, they are really good at coming right back to where they were other years. So once you have a problem with them, you'll probably always see them. And again, a good way to identify them from a bumblebee is that their abdomen tends to be completely black. So, all right, so that's carpenter bees. Again, pollinators, good friends, but also can be destructive. The other cool thing that Sarah's been working on, and I'll let you take it away.
Thanks. All right, so it's officially swarm season. Swarm season has to do with honeybees. I'm a beekeeper. And some people, like beekeepers, get very excited because if you get a good swarm, that is like scoring a free hive. And in my world, that's a wonderful thing. However, I take in mind that some people, when they walk outside and find something like what's in the picture hanging from a bush, that's not very exciting to them. They want it out of there. So I've been called, and I love when people, because my neighbors all know I'm the bee person. So they'll call me and say, "Hey, there's a bunch of bees, come get them." It's fantastic. I'll be there, get them out of your hair, and I'll leave probably all within 45 minutes by the time I set up. Unless it's up in a tree, it's going to take me a little bit longer there. So all the swarm is just a natural way for honeybee populations to grow. The swarm is going to consist of the old queen and then half of the worker bees, and they just leave the hive. I just had a swarm yesterday, and it almost looks like a cloud, like they're just they don't have an idea of what they're doing, so they're just flying around looking for a place, and wherever the queen lands is where they're all going to kind of huddle to until the scout bees find the right place that they want to make their hive in. Sometimes that'll be on a bush. One time I got called, it was on a chair. I've been called where it's on the side of a house. They're really not particular. um, but the main thing is a lot of people will call me, but they've already sprayed them with something. And once they spray them, there's a good chance you've killed the queen. I've been called, I've taken them. It's almost 100% mortality once they've been sprayed, even if they're like, but there's still some alive. Well, chances are that even the ones that got sprayed, they're not going to live a healthy life, and they need every worker bee to be able to build that hive back up to being as large as it is. So you don't want to spray them. Call extension. We have a list. MDA has a list that they've shared with us of beekeepers in our area that are more than happy to come get them. Put it on, if you're a social media person, put it on Facebook. Say I have a swarm. If you can put a picture on there, it's going to get more attention because a lot of people assume that you might have yellow jackets or another type of bee. So if you can put a picture of it on there, that's going to be really beneficial. And what's super cool about this picture is you can see the swarm behind me on the picture in the left. It looks like an extra part of the tree up in there. Yeah, that's it. Um, that swarm was mean to me. They didn't want to go where they were supposed to go. It took me trying to get them into that box 3 times before they finally realized that I was going to make them keep trying. And if you look on my hands on my left hand, right, right in the middle there, yeah, there you go. You can see the queen bee a little further, right, a little further to your left. There she is. You can see her big abdomen there. So that's the queen bee. Once you find the queen bee, if you can keep her, they're not going to leave her. So that's how I was able to finally get that honeybee swarm that didn't want to stay with me at all. So yeah, don't spray them. Post it, call extension. Someone will come get them for free. And you can see that's my hive. They finally went in there. They tried to live in a tree twice and tried to live in a bush once. So finally they decided that this was a okay house. And if you're just wondering how I finally got them to stick to this hive, was I finally put a little bit of extra sugar water because they like 1 to 1, 1 part sugar water to 1 part water. Put that in a little feeder in there, and they finally were like, "Oh, there's free food here too." And that's what made them finally stay, was giving them a little extra food. All right, Ashley. Do you want to talk about hardening off seedlings? Because this is what we end up talking to a lot of people about in May, because people will not harden off their vegetables or whatever they're putting out properly, and then we get a lot of people thinking they have diseased plants. So if you want to talk about that, you can, Brand.
Sure. So that's a great introduction to it. Basically, hardening off is just the process that you go through to ensure that your plants are ready to make it out in the real world. Usually we're babying them, we're taking extra care of them. They have different temperatures. They're not exposed to 100% sunlight. So it's just the process of exposing them to the natural outdoor elements a little bit at a time before you actually stick them out in your traditional vegetable garden or containers. So just remember they need, again, to be conditioned to the outside world a little bit before you just kind of throw them out there and say good luck. And
And then
again, a lot of the problems that we see that maybe look like diseases from fungus or other things can often just be exposure to the outdoor elements. Anything you want to add, Sarah?
I feel like there was something I was going to say and then it just left my brain. I'm not quite sure. I think probably just, the more mature the plant is, a little bit harder it's going to have transitioning to the outside if it's been protected for really long. Like I recognize that some of my plants, it's just easier to put a seed in the soil than it is to try to get them transitioned to living outside for the amount of time that they take. So just take that into consideration too. Like I'm okay with not having a tomato the first in my neighborhood. So I'm okay with them being a little bit smaller for where I'm living. Now, where Garrett County, you don't really have a choice. You really have to get moving if you want a good tomato to come
Yeah,
out of your garden before it gets too cold.
you nailed it. You nailed it. So again, this some of the advice for hardening your transplants. Again, 1 to 2 weeks before you're ready to put them in the garden, start taking them outside in a protected area, just to again get them adjusted and acclimated to the real world.
I remembered what I was gonna say. All right, so the other thing with transplanting is when I want to transplant something out, I always look at the weather. Like yesterday would have been a good day to transplant because today's overcast, there's calling for some rain. Like always be looking ahead at the schedule before you put something out because I can guarantee you in June and in late May when it's 80, 80, 80, 80, 80, no rain, it's not beneficial to put anything outside. I will hold off a week before I put something outside on a really, really hot, sunny, dry day versus just wait until the next week when it's calling for rain and it's going to be a little overcast. So that's just other food for thought is like really think about what the weather is going to be like when you're planting. Because if you're out there and you feel like you're going to melt into the soil, imagine being that little seedling that's getting put in that soil for the first time. It's probably going to be toast.
Yes, fantastic advice. All right, so we have allocated a few minutes here for any live questions. If people would like to enter them into the chat, if you're with us on Facebook, you can enter those there. Sarah, I'll let you. You're good at managing all these different sources. So
All
I
right,
guess
I'm looking at the both online. I'm not seeing anything coming in through either Facebook. So I'll keep an eye on there, but if anybody that joined us has a question, they can easily just put that in the chat. And I'll just keep an eye and give a second. And then if I see one pop up, I can just let you know.
perfect. So we just wanted to talk a little bit about plant shopping. This time of year is exciting for gardeners. It's a time when we're all out in the landscape, we're all looking for new plants to add. I get excited, super excited. I know Sarah, you do too. What new plants are you going to try this year? And I just wanted to point out this really nice publication. It's actually listed on the National Wildlife Federation website, and it's all about keystone plants. So this is less on vegetable gardening and less on production gardening, but more on the world of ecosystems and how we can build better ecosystems and have different flora and fauna in our landscapes to build diversity. So this is a lot of the work that was done by Doug Tallamy with University of Delaware. A lot of his research is focused on how you can attract more butterflies and Lepidoptera, so moths and butterflies, to your garden. And it's all about the food sources that the larvae need to consume. So for one example is the white oak tree. It can support 436 different species of moths or caterpillars, so moths or butterflies. So it's just one way. And of course, then what feeds on all of these caterpillars would be a lot of our songbirds because they're awesome protein sources. So if you want to build, bird and butterfly habitat, you should really think more about what those birds and butterflies want to eat naturally, not just what we can provide through feeders and other types of resources you're going to have to be responsible for taking care of. So just something to think about. Again, a lot of people don't have room for an oak tree if you have a small landscape. So things to think about would be like goldenrod. It supports 42 different species of specialist bees. So that's pretty exciting. So just really, really kind of fun things to think about as you're out there thinking about plant shopping. And of course, we always want to encourage people to avoid anything that's invasive in your area. So don't add things like barberry and burning bush and some of the plants that tend to be very prominent in a lot of our landscapes, but not necessarily good for our wildlife. friends.
And then other food for thought is a lot of people will think that they have to be all or nothing, like it's got to be 100% native, but it doesn't. Like even I think it's Dr. Talamy even said about how 70% is what most people should try to shoot for, 70% of natives, which is a really large amount. I think the biggest thing, like Ashley said, is just being mindful of what's invasive and trying to avoid those. But if you have some favorite plants that are not native but are not invasive, they're still nice to have. Like I dandelions are in my yard. My honeybees like them because they're both from Europe. It's not hurting anything. It's just being mindful of how, how invasive that it is. But actually, we did have a question in the chat.
Okay. Yep. Let me just talk real quick on this native plant.
It's a
So,
perfect transition. I get
and
you.
then, yep, then we'll hit that companion plant.
Awesome.
So, this weekend is the ninth annual Mountain Maryland Native Plant Festival. If you're here in Garrett County, it's going to be held at the New Germany State Park, which is down towards Grantsville. So it goes from 10 to 3. Lots of native plant retailers will be there, a lot of conservation organizations. So I just wanted to put a plug. The Master Gardeners will be there with the booth. So come see us, I guess, and get some native plants. So, yes, so companion planting, that's one of my favorite topics. And Sarah, I know you love to talk about companions too. So, if anybody is
I feel
listening
like
to us,
that's more you. Like every conference I've gone to, you've had like a nice little couple slides on companion planting. So I think Ashley's got this one. I do a little bit of it, but I feel like she is your girl for this.
well, thanks. So, companion planting is all about how we can do multiple plants in one area, and each plant is then going to benefit from the system. So, every part is kind of putting something in, and every part's getting something out. So, um, favorite plant or vegetable to plant with. So, I've done a lot of research and tried this on my own, like in my high tunnel when I'm trying to produce cucumbers because I have a lot of problems with cucumber beetles. So I like to do nasturtiums and radishes as my companions for cucumbers. So the theory is that the radish roots don't taste anything like a cucumber root. So whenever the larvae for the cucumber beetle are feeding on the cucumber roots, they bite a radish and they're supposed to be deterred. I don't harvest the radishes. I let them go full season and just stay in there. So I'm not pulling them up to disturb the cucumber roots because they tend to be very shallow and they don't like to have anything messed with. So especially when I'm also transplanting my cucumber plants, when I'm transplanting those out in the spring of the year, if I've started them early, I never mess with the roots. So I don't put them in plastic cell packs. I put them in either like peat pots or newspaper containers because they don't like to have their roots messed with because they're so shallow. So the other plant I really like with cucumbers is nasturtiums. So those are edible flowers. They're considered more of an herb, but they tend to, again, help to deter cucumber beetles. That's what a lot of the literature says. So those are some of my favorite companions. Of course, tomato and basil. That's another really good one. So a lot of research, not research, a lot of people say that the basil will make your tomatoes taste better. So that's what we always tend to do. And again, they like to be eaten together in a lot of dishes. So it's kind of nice to have them growing side by side anyway. Those are some of my top companions, but Sarah, you dropped a great chart in there. WVU Extension also has a really nice companion planting chart, and I'm happy to talk more about that if you have other questions.
Yeah, I was able to find that one through, I think was it Minnesota? Yeah, Minnesota Extension. And it really does a great job of telling you about how, certain things are just repelled by smell, some things are repelled by taste. Some would just get confused, so it's causing a confusion, like which leaf am I supposed to be laying my eggs on because these leaves all look the same. So I think that that's kind of cool. I've done marigolds before because marigolds have that scent. I know some people do it for the deer, but my garden has to be very fenced off because I have a huge deer presence. So I did it more for trying to ward off some of the other things that want to get to my plants. And the only advice that I would say with the marigolds are make sure you deadhead them really well or get them out of there at the end of the season because the next year I ended up with 1 million marigold plants, which doesn't sound like a problem until your whole garden looks like it's a marigold growing production area. So that's what I did. Don't be like me, get them out of there and you don't have to deal with it.
Yeah, and French marigolds, there is like literature that says that French marigolds will help deter root knot nematodes in your soil for companion planting. So that's also one. The other hard thing with companion planting is in trying to find like extension sources to back it up is it's really hard to replicate these trials time and time again because of differences in soils and climates. So it's not something that we have a ton of data on, and what works at your house may not work at other people's houses. So that can be kind of frustrating, and there's not a lot to say it works every single time, but that seems to be the case with most things in gardening, and why it's always a challenge.
That's why you're always learning. So that's the part of gardening I like the most is that there's so many variables. You're constantly changing the way things work. So I like that. I know some people find it frustrating. But kind of a good transition into planting your garden because there's certain plants that are very frustrating. And I recognize that it's just not worth it to grow to me. I don't have the right soil. I can work on that. But there's certain things that just don't work very well in my soil or that don't work very well in my garden, or I don't like it. So I don't grow it. So my number one thing when anybody says they're going to start a garden is to grow what you eat or what brings you joy. I think the joy part's important because if you like growing flowers, and that makes your mental health, makes you feel good inside, and you bring them inside and cut them, and it makes you happy every time you look at them. I think that's very beneficial for your health altogether. So I grow flowers that I cut. They're not native. I do a lot of zinnias and cosmos, and Ashley could probably make the whole list of all the flowers that she grows, and I grow them because they make me smile when I go past them. So that's why I do that. Same goes for food. I always love trying new things. This year, I have a picture coming up. It's garbanzo beans are the weird thing that I'm trying this year. Every year I try something new just because I think it's fun. I grew Swiss chard one year. I don't like Swiss chard. I tried it a bunch of different ways. I'm good. So it's okay to not grow things that you don't like, even if it grows really well where you are, or you're trying to, make a lot of different things. Just don't grow it. I already said about growing flowers because if it makes you happy, my goodness, do it. And then thinking about what might make your produce or think about what you want to make with your produce is a good idea. So I'm always thinking ahead. Like I've already, before I decided to grow garbanzo beans, I had to look about how to prepare them because I've never made them fresh. I've only bought them in a can. So I always have to look into like, how do I preserve them or how am I going to eat them? And it just kind of saves you the headache of here you harvested these things and now you're like, what do I do now? So that's also part of my planning.
Which is a great transition to our next topic of, so here in Garrett County, our frost-free date officially isn't till June the 5th for warm season crops, but we're getting closer. And I know for you guys in Allegheny County, you're probably really, really close to your frost-free date. So, this is traditionally warm season crops are what we think of as traditional vegetable crops, in our region. So things like beans and corn and cucumbers and eggplant and all of tomatoes, of course, those are what we traditionally start to put out, the end of May, the beginning of June. So we just wanted to spend a little bit of time having a conversation about some of these crops. In particular, there's a lot of terms that get thrown around, and beans and tomatoes are probably two of the easiest plants that I think you can grow that are going to produce a lot if you're looking to either preserve them or if you're looking to eat a lot of them throughout the growing season. Of course, let's try that again. Things like summer squash are also a good plant to put in there because one plant can feed multiple people throughout the season. But we wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about what the word heirloom mean really and why that's important, because these are some of the terms that we see being thrown around on social media and in different websites and on blogs and that sort of thing. So what does that word really mean? So we're gonna skip through some of these bean slides. I forgot I stuck all those in there to really talk about the terminology. And this is important again when you're thinking about what you want to do, as Sarah said at the end of the season. If you want to be able to save seeds this fall, it's going to be important that you put the right plants in your garden this spring. So every plant is going to have a variety. That's just like my name's Ashley. Sarah's name is Sarah. That's just the name that is given to that particular plant. And it could be, for a particular taste, shape, color, the way it acts, the way it's resistant to a disease or not. This is just some examples of different varieties of corn. And then we can talk about, well, what kind of seeds can I actually save at the end of the season? And in order for you to be able to save seeds that are true to the parent characteristics, you have to pick plants that are what something called open pollinated. So whenever you're looking for your seeds in the next few weeks to plant, or maybe you already have them, you want to look for that term, open pollinated. So other words that are sometimes used in place of open pollinated are heirloom, but in order for it to be an heirloom, it has to be open pollinated. So not exciting words, but I kind of like those things you need to be thinking about as you go into your planning and starting to plant stage. So if it says hybrid or F1 for first generation, you cannot save those seeds and expect to get the same thing. So I say that you're not going to get, if you save tomato seeds from an F1, you're not going to get a pepper. You're still going to get a tomato, but it's not going to be the exact same as what you're hoping for. So just things to think about. And
I could tell you a fun
reason.
story about that one, Ashley.
All
Someone
right, let's.
gave me a heirloom that they said it was an heirloom cucumber. Took them for their word, saved some seeds. Sorry, there's always weird cars out in front of our office. And I was like, well, I'll give it a try. It was just like a market more or it was something like that. The next season I grew them, it was all white cucumbers. There was some white slicer genetics in there, and they all came out white cucumbers. Now, were they cucumbers? Sure were. Did they make fluorescent looking pickles? They sure did, because they're white and that's the way they look when you pickle them. So they still tasted good. But when you put in that much effort, because let's be honest, gardening is effort, you want to know what you're gonna get. So I always err on the side of caution. It was a fun experiment for me. I obviously didn't save those seeds, but it would be a bummer if if you wanted to can with them. They made some ugly
Yeah.
pickles.
And if you have kids or something, they don't want white pickles. They want a pickle that looks like a pickle, unfortunately. No matter how hard you try to sell it, it doesn't work. So that's a great transition into, again, so self-pollinating flowers are going to be the ones that are going to breed true, the easiest with the least amount of work. So a self-pollinating flower, basically, as soon as it opens, it's pollinated by itself. So a lot of, bees and pollinator friends can help with the pollination, but it's not always necessary. Usually wind and rain take care of the majority of these self-pollinating plants. So beans and peas and lettuce are kind of where we tell people to start. They're the easiest because they self-pollinate. So you're looking for beans, peas, lettuce, and tomatoes that are, again, either open pollinated or sometimes you'll see that word heirloom in there. So again, if you do want to save seeds, this is a little bit about how you want to do it. We can talk about this at a future event. But you want to leave the pods in the bean on the plant for as long as possible to let all of those nutrients go right into the bean seed. So again, you want them to get kind of dry. Tomatoes, they actually do best whenever you save the seeds through a process of fermentation, where you actually squeeze all of the pulp from inside of your heirloom tomato and put it into a jar, let it ferment for 5 to 10 days, and then collect the seeds. That kind of mimics nature. And if it was to just lay out in your garden and ferment all winter long, that kind of gets rid of some of that slushy layer, I guess, or the little bit of slime layer. If you look at a tomato seed, that gets rid of it and then makes it more likely to germinate and have better germination rates. So this is something cool that Sarah and I both saw a couple weeks ago, and this is one way to preserve your green beans. This is an old Appalachian method. It's called leather breeches, so where you actually dry your beans on a string, and then they just kind of hang out dried like that until you're ready to use them later in the year. So you can also save your bean seeds this way. But again, the theory with this particular idea or tradition is that you would rehydrate them in boiling water and they kind of turn back into a green bean. You eat the pod and all with these leather britches. So I know this is one reason that I'm excited about trying some different heirloom beans this growing season. Anything you want
And
to add?
I was laughing because she was asking me about this, and I was like, oh my gosh, I was just reading about that because I was reading some literature about making leather breeches, which I was like, how are you sewing with beans? Because I took it literally because that's what my brain does. So then when I found out, I asked my also Appalachian husband, I'm like, you ever heard of these? And he didn't either. So I don't know if it's more of a Southern Appalachian kind of thing. But I had never heard of these. Like my granny would either can them or freeze them. That was what she would do.
Yeah, same here, same here. So I'm excited. I'm thinking this is probably like older, older than our grandparent tradition. Let's
And
go with that.
that makes sense because like the ability to save it was so simple. You just strung it up, let them. It's basically creating a dehydrator. You're dehydrating them and then adding them. I think they put like pork in there to give it a flavor and then rehydrate. It sounded like it took a long time. Like this was an all day event to get them rehydrated and then cooked.
Yes, maybe
I'm here
multiple.
for it. Like that just sounds like it's gonna bring a whole other taste to it that I've never had before.
Exactly. So something new to try. So a couple of the heirloom beans, I was also gifted some heirloom beans from a community member this spring. So this has kind of gotten me excited about heirloom beans. And this is one that I found. None of them were named, unfortunately, in my gift box, or very few were. But this was a Jacob's cattle bean. So it's actually like a brown bean that you shell out and cook, not like a green bean where you eat the pod and all. But it's a bush bean and it just looks so pretty, and I'm so excited to try it.
It
Uh,
looks like a little herd of cattle. Like that was the perfect name. Look at that. That was like a little herd of cattle.
that's what I see too. So
I was it Hereford? Hereford cattle?
looks
The
like it.
brown and white ones.
That's them with the white faces. So the next one is a cranberry bean. So a lot of people buy these as like horticultural beans in the fall of the year that you shell out. They have the nice, pretty pink pods on them. Again, the longer you leave them on the vine, the better it is for preserving and shelling. I've always thought shell beans were a lot of work, just like shell peas. So I've not gotten too excited about them in the past because you can go to the store right now. Luckily, we're so blessed with having lots and lots of different places to purchase food, but you can go to the store and buy a bag of beans and all the work's already done. So the motivation to do this is sometimes not there, but I'm excited because they are pretty. And it's really kind of cool because every now and then you'll get some of these that are completely all red. So you have the speckled ones, and then you have some that are all red in your bean packets or your bean pod, I guess.
And I think that goes into like the whole reason that some people like the reason I like growing things is because it's almost like bragging rights. Like at Thanksgiving, I'm like, this is from my pumpkin and this is from my beans. So I think it's just also cool that you can share that and kind of get other people to realize how much work went into it. Makes you less
Exactly.
wasteful. I did notice that. We're gonna eat every bite of it because I know how much work went into that. So it does kind of force you to be a little less easily wasteful because things do seem cheap.
Absolutely. That's a great point. And then the last one I just wanted to share was Kentucky Wonder, which is a pole bean. So it'll climb and go wherever you want it to go. And this is actually a green bean that you would eat, pod and all traditionally. So lots of different names that it goes under, but I thought this was another fun one to try. So with that, we just wanted to spend a few minutes promoting some of our upcoming classes. We have a couple minutes left on our session here. Just a quick plug for all of our free library classes here in Garrett County. Just call the library branch that you would like to attend. There are kids activities available if you want to bring a whole family along. That's encouraged, and we would love to have you. So tonight, we're going to talk more about heirloom beans and tomatoes at Oakland Library, and that starts at 6 p.m. And one other program here in Garrett County is the Garden Apprentice Program. So if you're a beginning gardener and would like to, learn hands-on at a community garden plot, we are encouraging people to apply for this program. We will provide everything needed material-wise, plants, seeds, tools. You just come and learn alongside, and then you'll get all the free produce from that particular plot.
So my turn. Yay. All right. We're going to have our Master Gardeners Spring Plant Sale. It's coming up on Saturday, May 25th from 9 to 1. We're guessing 9 to 1. We'll see how much is attendance. We do a lot of splits from our garden. It's going to be some of the different natives that we have here, some of the vegetables that the Master Gardeners have grown, some of the different flowers. And then something we're trying out this year is because like it seems like a waste of our time to sit there and price everything. And our whole goal with Master Gardeners is trying to get people to just enjoy growing things and want to grow them. And we recognize that there are financial issues with growing things. So it's just going to be a pay what you want. Just know that any money that we end up making goes back into the Master Gardener programs that we're able to give for the community. So we just thought it was like, it makes more sense to not just put a price on things and just say, you know what, if you have something, give it. If you don't, we understand as well too. This one's a little fuzzy because I had to steal it off Facebook. But at the Georges Creek Library, we're doing a creating sourdough starter, and it's going to be all about gardening, plants that you can use on making a pretty focaccia. And what's kind of cool is you're going to actually have a starter to take home with you. It's already a mature starter, so if you've ever dealt with sourdough before and you try to make your own, it's a lot of work. Whereas if you just get a split off someone, which it happens to be mine, because I love to bake and I love sourdough, made 4 loaves this weekend. So if you like to do that, we're going to have some extra herbs that you can take home with you too. And everything's there. It's kind of amazing because she even got like the jars that you can put it in, and you're going to learn how to feed it. So I'm going to go over the type of flour that you feed with mine, so you can just be able to, you could literally take it home and whip up some dough that evening or put it in your fridge and use it whenever you want to use it. The only thing is, I think there was 20 seats and there's only 8 seats left. So if that's something you want to do, I made a quick short URL because the only URL I could find was a monster sized one. But if you just go to their Facebook page, go to Georges Creek Library to their events, you can find it there. And it is in the evening because I know as someone that used to always teach that I was frustrated that I could never go to anything during the day. So it is in the evening. So if you can make it, come on down. Oh yeah, and this is actually tomorrow. Ashley must be onto something because you're doing beans and tomatoes tonight, in their last class with this backyard gardening session. And this is statewide because one of the people that's doing it is on the other side of the state. It's going to be everything tomatoes. We're going to talk about the history of tomatoes, heirloom and hybrids. We're going to talk about some different fun things that you can do with them. All things tomatoes. And there is like a URL you can get.
Awesome. And I think the rest of these slides are just kind of, informational. So Marilyn Grows blog, if you're looking for a nice educational blog that has different topics, every day they try to post something new or a couple times a week. Check that out. You can actually like put your email in there and they'll send you an email based on what information or what topics you're interested in. Ask Extension, again, if you can't get to one of our plant clinics virtually or in person, you can always do the Ask Extension website where everything is totally free, and within 24 to 36 hours, you'll get an answer to your question by experts from across the state. So with that, I think that's all we have. Join us next time for our next Q&A lunch break on June the 10th. And Sarah, do you have anything you want to add?
Nope, I think that is great. I appreciate the couple of questions. I think next month it might ramp up a little bit because as we put our plants into the soil, that's when everything starts to show up and we notice things. Just remember, it's always a lot better to be proactive than reactive. So just if you know you're planting beans, look ahead and see what things like to eat a bean so you can look for what's going to be on there instead of being like, oh, I had no idea that ate beans. So be thinking ahead with that. And that's all I got.